Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Sebastian and Sierp. This is our special Halloween episode, and we are joined tonight by Mr. Chris Eddy, responsible for much of the goings-on here in Lexington. Chris is going to tell us a lot about the things he does, and there are many. Chris, so glad to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Tonight.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, first question I got to ask you, what got you into publishing?
Well, I was straight out of college. My best friend Chuck Creasy and I, he was straight out of grad school. The economy wasn't great. There weren't a lot of jobs out at the time. It was 1997. And we had this dumb idea to start a publication for the Chevy Chase neighborhood. That turned into us with a couple $100 to our name, walking around with sort of a really terribly mocked up publication and walking around to different businesses in the neighborhood. And we would just say, hey, this is kind of what we're going to do. Will you buy an ad? Mm-hmm. And will you give me a check right now, because I really need the money to get the first issue out the door. So we did that for a while, got enough money together to print our first edition. We did that with really no publishing experience, put it out on the street, and it was pretty bad, I'm not going to lie to you. But it was,
We like honesty on this show.
Yeah, but it was good enough that people said, okay, we'll give you another shot. Mm-hmm. And so, a month later, we came out with our second issue, and on and on and on. And after a little while, it sort of took off. It took off enough for us to hire our first person about a year into it, I guess. It was just Chuck and myself for the first year. We were able to hire somebody to help us sell advertising. Mm-hmm. So we did that for a couple of years, took off to the point where we could sort of pay ourselves a little something. And, after a couple of years, it was doing pretty well. Mm-hmm. Of course, it was, pre-new millennium at that point. So
Different time.
So about 4 years later, we're chugging along nicely, and we get another dumb idea. So this time we think, hey, let's do something similar to this Chevy Chase neighborhood publication, and we'll do something on at that time, the sort of emerging south side of Lexington. Demographically, it looked very similar to what we were doing in the Chevy Chase area, and it was growing, it was new, and we wanted to get down in that area. So we started the Southsider magazine in 2001.
Mm-hmm. What did you all call the first publication?
Chevy Chaser magazine,
Chevy Chaser.
which is still around 22 years later. And
I remember seeing it back in those early days. I grew up in Chevy Chase,
Yeah.
so I would see those around, and it's certainly grown a lot.
oh yeah.
All the time.
Well, so one of the things that we thought would be important is it's a free publication, but unlike a lot of free publications that you just find in racks in businesses and on the street, is we wanted to put these publications literally inside the homes of the people in the neighborhood, so everybody in a certain area got that publication. Mm-hmm. So that began with the first couple issues of Chuck, myself, our girlfriends, now our wives, literally walking them house to house. We went to, about 10,000 houses.
Wow.
After our first issue, the four of us walking. It took a week of 12, 13-hour days of walking house to house. And we quickly realized that was unsustainable. We couldn't do that, run a publication, and do that at the same time. So we got groups to help us out. Church youth groups, Girl Scout troops, that sort of thing. We did that for about a year. And then one time during the winter, it dumped a foot of snow on our delivery day.
Oh, wow.
And, it was a Girl Scout troop leader. They said, hey guys, I can't send these kids out in this snow to do it this way. So we scrambled, we got it accomplished. We said we have to do something different here. And so we took a big leap and a big expense for us at the time and decided to mail them basically to every house in a certain geographical area. Mm-hmm. And we've continued to do that to today. We do that with Chevy Chaser magazine and with Southsider magazine. So our idea is we want to completely saturate certain areas that fit the demographics and the psychographics that we're interested in.
Right, so it was a gamble that paid off because
Yeah.
obviously you're still around and it's grown.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
So. Which, and to me, it's kind of interesting because there are, I don't know, I can't remember how many publications were floating around. I won't say any names, but at that time, there were some that you would get on the stands in Kroger and other
Yes.
places, and that have since gone the way of the dodo, really.
In fact, there was a Herald Leader article, this was say around 2001, 2002, and there were a bunch that had started, and I think they listed 18 local publications at that time. It was
That many?
insane.
Wow.
Yeah, and most of those didn't last a year,
Yeah.
but a handful of them did. I've got to think there were probably only a couple of those on that list that are still around today.
Well, and sometimes I'll see some publications that are still around in certain places, but I hadn't seen them in years.
Right.
And we were out at a pizza place, my wife and I, not too long ago, and I saw Coffee Times,
Oh, right.
which I was like, I haven't seen that in 10 years. But obviously, it's still,
It's a franchise, and so people
Yeah.
pick up that franchise every once in a while, and
yeah, man.
it comes and goes, and
Yeah, it's interesting how that. But what do you feel, aside from what you've already said, what do you feel was different about the Chevy Chaser and Southsider that made it stick? I mean, was it just strategic advertising, or you were doing stuff that was very pertinent to the times?
I think you have to have readers to have advertisers, right? So I think first and foremost, we treated it as sort of our baby, but we also treated it as a business. It was, in fact, our source of income. So we tried to match up the right readers with the right advertisers. Okay, that's still what we do in our company today. We put essentially businesses with readers, consumers or B2B, whatever it might be. It's important to have pertinent information for a reader. If you want to keep a reader, it has to mean something to them. One thing we do is, and I hate to overuse words like hyper-local, but we are a hyper-local publication. And so it means what the stories we do mean a lot to the people who live in let's call it in Lexington, sometimes even in a subset of Lexington. But
People
outside of,
who know this geography and
Right.
this, what goes on here, the
Yeah.
particulars of where we live.
but somebody even maybe in Richmond couldn't care less.
Yeah.
So it's a double-edged sword, especially when it comes to now when you're talking about web readership. Again, it might mean something to somebody in central Kentucky, but outside of that, the rest of the world doesn't care, with few exceptions.
Sure. Yeah,
So
and,
that-
and unlike web stuff here, you have cost of publication.
Right.
Which factors in versus we've got a website and we may be talking about something that people
Right.
don't care about here, but hey, we're not out any money on it.
Right. Well, I mean, literally, a guy can be in his mom's basement, and he could have a website about pop star of the moment or whatever, and have millions and millions of page views on their website with literally no expense whatsoever.
Right.
We're the polar opposite of that in the fact that we have a lot of expenses in publishing and writing and printing and distribution and all of these things, and it only appeals to a small, a tiny fraction of 1% of even the country's population.
Right.
So what we have to do is make that very, very relevant to our readers. And so in turn, if we have a good readership, hopefully advertisers will see that and say, I want to put my message in front of these people.
Yeah, so as times have changed and technology's improved and it's easier to publish, especially on the web,
Right.
then the content has to get better, a higher degree of specificity to the locale. And you basically have to know how to package it and then seek out advertising that
Right.
matches the reader, like you said.
Right. And so, I mean, we're a digital company as well. Every publication in this day and age is a digital company as well. But what it does is it makes that digital information, again, great for the reader who's right here geographically, but we don't have that opportunity to reach an entire world out there because nobody cares.
Yeah, nobody cares.
Right.
Yeah, whenever we travel, a lot of times we'll get to talking to people about bourbon.
Sure.
And depending on where you are, they'll have maybe a slight interest, but nothing like, driving 5 miles downtown from me,
Absolutely.
And so it's interesting because you think all people think is you think, but of course,
I'll tell you, even our readership, our top stories are across our publications. We'll look at the web demographic or data on the readership. Usually in a given year, 7 out of 10 will be food or bourbon booze related. Even in Business Lex and the Business Journal, people love that sort of content here. New restaurant opening, it'll go crazy. One of my favorite stories is Eric Carlson, one of our former editors of Business Lexington, texted me one morning and he said, "Hey, I'm at Liquor Barn and there's a Pappy Van Winkle the lottery this morning."
Oh, cool.
And I said, "Okay, cool. Well, I'll see you in a little bit." He texted me back at about 11 noon. He says, "Man, this line is just crazy." He's like, "I feel really bad about it." I'm like, "Don't worry about it." He's like, "You know what? I'm on my iPhone. I'm just gonna type out a little story while I'm standing here in line." He literally takes a picture of the line, writes like 4 paragraphs while he's standing in line, uploads it to the Business Lexington website, and it's our top story of the year.
Yeah,
Sounds
yeah.
about right.
Like on the fly journalism.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's wonderful. But I mean, do you have a lot of that kind of thing where there'll be sort of these stories that are grabbed out of thin air, as it were, and then they wind up being hot topics?
Not really.
That's
That's
an exception.
that's an exception. Most of the stories that we do were more magazine focused, even with Business Lexington, so that it goes through a stricter editorial process. We have a writer write it, we have a photographer shoot it, we have an editor edit it,
Yeah,
and then we have a copy editor re-edit it, and then it's put up or it's put in the publication, and that's the way most of our stories go. But occasionally something that's a little bit more breaking news happens, and we knock that out as quickly as possible and get it up as soon as we can, because a lot of times those sort of stories, the interest is there and then it's gone in 48 hours.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, almost like flash.
Right.
Like a flash mob that happens. It's like,
Exactly.
and then on to something else. Well, that's
We have
interesting.
such short attention spans these days.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. Well, and do you feel that, I've noticed that with a lot of major newspapers that have, and I won't mention any names again, but that have suffered and they've diminished and they're still trying to do maybe what they were doing 20 or 30 or 50 years ago, sort of maybe being of more interest to the general than the specific.
Right.
Do you feel like that's one of the major causes that a lot of them are, aside from the obvious, people have many other options nowadays?
That's part of it. Part of it is a business model that if I came to you, say you're an investor, and I came to you and I said, "Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to write about all today's news, and I'm going to put it on people's doorsteps tomorrow. Would you invest in that company today?" Well, the answer is probably no. And that's just a sad truth of legacy media in general. The Metro Daily is in a tough spot in a traditional newspaper business. Now, every newspaper out there is changing their business models. If you think about it, the Lexington Herald-Leader doesn't even have their own presses anymore.
Right.
And when people said, "Oh, they're moving to Louisville, that's a terrible idea, they're done." And I'm thinking, that's the best thing they could have done for themselves.
Absolutely.
They had, 30-something-year-old presses. To replace a press like that would be
Hundreds.
$50 million,
Yeah,
$60 million.
it'd be a lot.
To tie themselves to a press in a changing media landscape as they are trying to evolve their business into a more digital-based business, tying themselves to a press would be a terrible idea, in my opinion. So I think they did exactly the right thing. I think they're all doing, they're all trying. They're all trying to move in a different direction. Um, uh, but they're all carrying around a lot of extra baggage, if you want to
Right.
look at it that
There's
way.
the nostalgia of the way it was for years. There was, here's
Right.
how we've always done it. There's the risk of, we're trying to do a new business model so we can survive.
Right.
Not sure if it's gonna work or not.
And there's a few exceptions. There's the New York Times, killing it. Did $1 billion worth of subscriptions last year. But not everybody can do what the Times is doing. They have they have some of the best writers in the world. They appeal to a worldwide audience.
Sure.
Washington Post, has Bezos money behind it, so they can do whatever they want. And what they seem to be doing is more, better journalism.
Sure.
You know.
Well, and also how much of that is web,
Sure.
I mean, I'm sure that accounts for a big part of that billion,
Oh yeah.
you know.
The Economist is doing a great job. I mean, there's newspapers and magazines out there that are doing very well, actually. But they're at a scale or a niche that most newspapers just can't. They just don't have the resources to do that sort of thing. So when you
Right.
get down to the Metro Daily, that's a whole different world
Like
than New York Times.
a mid-sized thing by comparison.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting too. I wonder if it's the same. I haven't looked at the numbers or anything like that, but I wonder if it's the same in, say, Europe with the London Times and with bigger papers, or if, this is happening more in America.
I don't know the answer to that, to be honest with you.
I don't know either. I know my wife, who's from Germany, is always lamenting that people aren't reading as much as they used to.
Right.
But when we went to Germany, it seemed like they were reading a lot more there than here.
Okay.
That might have been my projection, but it seemed that way. It
Sure.
seemed, things are just still being done differently there.
Yeah.
Consumerism didn't have its fangs totally
Right.
in that culture the way it does in ours, I don't think. Or if it did, I didn't see it. But yeah, it's. So, do you foresee in the next, say, 5-10 years that it'll be more of the same, just more local, more specific, getting almost down to such a personal story that it's when you pick up the paper, you're like, yeah, I know these people and I know exactly what they're doing.
Right. I think the whole concept of print is dead. Is overwrought, but I think it's also parts of print are dead or dying. Parts aren't. Parts are stable. Some parts are growing. I don't think you can lump all print in together.
Right.
So I think what we do on the print side, I think will, at least for the time being, stay similar to what we're doing, trying to stay very, very relevant to our readership, making sure that we have information that they can't get other places, or they come to us to get that first. Let's put it that way.
Right.
Another problem with the Metro dailies is that, years ago in a rush to cut costs, they pulled more and more wire service, more and more AP, or whatever their, big newspaper media wire service was, and whittled down those local reporters. Because there's, that kind of content is very expensive.
Sure.
But what it did is it created that same sports article, that same lifestyle article to be printed, in 500 newspapers across the country, the same exact one. Relevancy got lost when that happened. It didn't say, hey, this is me. This didn't say, hey, this means something to Chip. It just meant that means something to people in America.
Right.
And so what we try to do is we don't do any of that. Everything that you see in our publications, everything you see on our websites was created in-house by real people, real human beings.
Yeah, and there does seem to be something about the imparting of meaning, like you used the word, what does this mean to me, or said that, and it's kind of like, yeah, there's sort of this supposed meaning that you would see if you picked up, say, a People magazine or a Newsweek.
Right.
And you'd say, well, I'm reading about some crazy movie star who went off the deep end, and somehow that story pertains to me. I can relate. I have a nephew who's, lost his mind or something, something like that, and I can relate to that story, but it's in a very general way.
Yes.
And I know that, 20 million other people are reading that versus, oh, this happened 2 blocks away from me.
Right.
And, yeah, and I couldn't get that online anywhere unless it was somebody put it on Facebook that, lives in this vicinity or something like that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, an example is my wife and I were cleaning out something a few years ago, and we found something wrapped in a newspaper from the 50s, I want to say. And if you remember back then, like the pages were, physically huge.
Right.
But also, so there were 5 columns across in tiny type. Just type. I mean, sheets of paper, just tiny type. And it was one story after another, little clips of everything from, a daily paper, everything, every tiny little social engagement, to somebody made a nice pie for somebody else. There was everything in these publications. The relevancy was down to your street level in a citywide paper sometimes. Mm-hmm. And to me, that was such a revelation. I'm like, I guess that's kind of what we do, but we don't have 300 reporters doing that.
Right.
Like they did literally back then.
Mm-hmm.
But those are the sort of things that we try to bring to light in our publications. There's a lot of really cool stories happening in this town. There's a lot of cool things being created. There are people who are world famous in their fields that even their neighbors don't know what they do.
Right.
I always love those stories. Those are the stories that really get me excited to be able to bring that to everybody else and go, hey, this person is awesome. And you just thought he was that guy you see at Kroger every once in a while.
Right.
That's what really gets me going when it comes to story selection.
Yeah, it's kind of in keeping with what we started the show for, because when we initially talked about it and said, well, what do we want to do? I came up with a list of people that I would like to see on the show, but then the list quickly got narrowed down.
Yeah.
And the reason was, some of the people were people that I knew, and they have some, they're well known in their field for something. Right. And I knew having them on the show probably would, the numbers would ramp up, which would be great. But the problem we ran into was that a lot of those people, number one, don't work well on camera.
Sure.
Or they are, even though they may be well known, they're not able to talk about the deeper issues underneath what they're doing, which is really what we were trying to do with the show.
Sure.
So for you, you're doing these things you've been talking about, but for instance, why are things getting more local and specific? What is it about, the zeitgeist that's changing that makes that happen the way it's happening? And it's not happening just here, it's happening pretty much everywhere. You just say, well, it's the internet, but internet's been around for a while now. And is that really the issue, or is it that people's psyches are shifting into a different way of receiving story and information?
Well, I think, for us, there's media fragmentation. So everything is getting chopped up into smaller pieces. Mm-hmm. Everything from TV, radio, print, internet, social media, maybe not billboards. Billboards might not have changed all that much except for the occasional digital billboard, right? There's direct mail. There's a million ways to market your company. You can have a guy spinning a sign on the side of the road. There's lots of different ways. And if you think about it, once upon a time, say in Lexington back in the 50s, there were 2 newspapers, and 95% of households took a paper back then. 95.
That's a lot.
That's crazy, right? You had 3 TV stations, handful of radio stations, and that's it.
Right.
That's it. Now there are a million ways to spend your marketing dollars, whether it's here locally, whether it's with, Google or Facebook. Google and Facebook eat up the vast majority of marketing spends, period, these days.
Right.
You know, maybe not the vast majority, but
A
a
lot.
huge amount.
Yeah.
So it's just a different world. And I think more and more, it's people becoming more and more niche. If you look at advertising agencies, for example, even 10 years ago, we probably had 8 or 10 full-service advertising agencies in town. Now we have 1 or 2 now, you know?
Right.
But what we have is lots of small shops. We have video guys, we have audio guys, we have, SEO people and,
Right, they've become more specific, too.
PPC. Yes, everybody's like specializing and they're getting down nitty-gritty, and they're voice guys, and there's, instead of having this everything under one roof like say Cornet still does. But most of the reason that I see for that is they have national clients. They're not just dealing with like Central Kentucky anymore. They're doing that at a national level. Everybody else is specializing.
Right.
And I don't know if that's good, bad, or what. It's just the way the world is now.
But that's interesting that you talk about, a company like that is still doing that sort of, we have everything marketing in-house the way it was in the old days, because that to me parallels the New York Times thing you just said a minute ago.
Sure.
Which is, if you're down on this very base level, you better be highly specialized.
Right.
If you're in this mid-range, you may or may not need to specialize more. At the very least, you need to change your game, kind of like the Herald going to Louisville, right?
Right.
But then if you're up here, you still have this ability to kind of keep things the way it was, but you might be delivering it slightly differently, but you still have all those resources and kind of the same presence, or maybe even more presence. So
We've heard the saying that a lion survives by being a lion and a mouse survives by being a mouse. I think that's a good tale in media these days, because everybody is either specializing or they're maybe growing their business into things like a lot of media companies are moving into digital services, SEO, PPC, reputation management, website building, all that stuff, because it is, a lot of them are probably already doing that for clients anyway, to some degree or another. Might as well, can't beat them, join them, right?
sure.
So we don't do a lot of that ourselves, but what we've done is segued into events and promotions in a heavier way than we had before. I guess that we can get into that more later.
Well, actually, we can get into it here in just a second. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with Chris Eddy right here on Sebastian and Sierp.
At Kyojuteru Kempo, we believe that everyone has the right to defend themselves and their loved ones. Violence can visit us despite age, race, or gender. Call us at Kyojuteru Kempo or check us out at kyojuteru.org. kyojuteru.org.
Hello, I'm Chip Sebastian. I am the co-host of Sebastian and Sierp. If you've been liking the shows, please click like down below. And if you want to subscribe to our YouTube channel, jump on over to YouTube, click subscribe, and you will get the most recent episodes of our show where we're interviewing all kinds of great and interesting people. So we're looking forward to a lot more shows. Stay tuned. It's rolling. Just begun. And we're back. Talking with Chris Eddy here. He does many things, Smiley Pete Publications, and we're getting ready to talk about some of the events that Chris has come up with. And now, were these done with Chuck Creasy as well?
Yes.
They were, okay. So, no, we're talking about, what, the Crave Festival?
Right, Crave
We're
Food
talking
Music
about,
Festival.
and I really want to thank you for this next one, Burger Week. Okay. Yeah, I think we've all enjoyed
yeah.
the benefits of that. So please tell us how that whole thing started.
Well, so 7 years ago, we decided we wanted to dip our toe into the event space. For us, it's a natural progression of what we do, in the sense that, I mean, we market for events all the time. Every single month, I'm marketing dozens of events. So we decided that, hey, we wanted to create some events, maybe even some business events for Business Lexington that weren't boring networking stuff, right? We want to do something we want to create a name for ourselves to something that was fun and interesting.
Catchy and fun, and
Yeah.
everybody's like, hey, cool, we're gonna go do that.
Right.
Right.
So we were going to start doing some small events, and instead we launched a food and music festival, which was probably not our brightest idea, because we didn't really have the experience in doing that at the time. So
So it wasn't smooth sailing right from the get-go then?
well, let's just say that we pulled off our first one and didn't lose money or didn't have any fatal flaws, let's put it that way. People came back next year. That was a good thing. Nobody died.
Yeah.
Yes. So we had hired somebody to help us do events, Robbie Morgan, and she came up with this idea like, hey, let's do this food and music festival. And we said, all right, let's do it. And I think we had 2 or 3 months lead time, not a whole lot, but we wanted to have this food festival that was not a 500-person, $150 a ticket wine and cheese thing, for wealthy people only. We wanted to create something like everybody wanted to go to, and we wanted to not just be an elite thing. We wanted everybody to go and have a genuinely good time, listen to some great local and regional music, come and taste what we call now your new favorite restaurant. We wanted to have everything from fine dining to diner cheeseburgers, and everything in between. And the cool thing about what we did at Crave is we had, back then it was a $1, $3, and $5 plate. So it was small plates. So it wasn't you go and you drop 20 bucks and you get a big plate of food and go home. The idea was you go and get little samples from 10 different places. So you get to try lots of new things and drink a beer, watch a great band, hang out, have a good time. We wanted to be family friendly. So we had lots of stuff for kids. We have a food performance stage. We have lots of stuff. There's a little something for everybody at Crave. So we just did our 7th Crave back in August. So it's grown to 20,000 people coming out over a weekend, out to the Masterson Station Park where we are now, and it's a lot of good fun, and it allows people, say like me, I've got 2 kids. You want to go out and try a new restaurant, and you go out, and even a moderate dinner is going to cost you $100, right? So maybe you don't get out of your box too much, because maybe you go into a restaurant and you don't like it and you just blow $100.
The worst, man.
Right? Well, you can take your family to Crave and you could try 10, 15 different restaurants, and then you'll go back and try them again. And so that's sort of our pitch to restaurants as well. You have the rare opportunity to actually put your food in somebody's mouth. Hundreds, thousands of people's mouths. These guys serve thousands of portions, and sometimes to people who are their regulars. Sometimes people who've never even heard of their restaurant before.
It's very likely in Lexington.
Right.
As many, yeah.
So, so that's that's our pitch to everybody, restaurants and to festival goers. You're going to get to try 10 different places.
Yeah.
Thousands of people are going to try your food probably for the first time.
It's like a huge sampler platter.
It is. It is. Right.
Yeah.
So that's that's sort of Crave in a nutshell. But it's I think it's become one of those things over the last 7 years that's on people's calendars. It's like
Sure.
Woodland Art Fair, and some of the other things that, the great street festivals in town, like I think we're on people's calendar and they come.
Did the Burger Week itself, did that predate Crave?
No, it came after
It
Craig.
came after, okay. Okay. Yeah, so, but that's been going, what, 5 years?
5
6 years
years?
now?
5 years, I think. So Burger Week, Chuck and I were at a conference in Nashville, and we were talking to a couple of guys from the Portland Mercury All Weekly in Portland, Oregon. And 3 a.m. at a bar, we'd been drinking a little bit, and we just started talking about, hey, what's working?
Yeah. That's when the best ideas come around, by the way.
Oh, yes.
3 a.m.
And one of the guys just looked at the other and said, Burger Week. And Chuck and I just looked at each other like, Burger? Of course, Burger Week. We didn't even know what it was. We're like, Burger Week.
Sounds great.
Of course. And so then they explained what Burger Week was, and the idea was that you had a week in your town, $5 off-menu special burgers, okay? So you get a bunch of restaurants to make a really cool burger, it's $5 for a week, and then you promote it. Mm-hmm. We thought that's so stupidly brilliant. We can do that. We could do that easy. And so we came out with some information, went out and called on some restaurants, and I will tell you, it was the easiest thing we've ever sold. Because everything, when you do something for the first time, there's always that, well, let's wait and see. People just went, oh yeah, we can
That's
do
been burgers.
We can do that. You have the people who say, I can't make any money on a $5 burger. And, depending on your restaurant, that's probably true, but
That's not necessarily the point, is it?
well, not necessarily. So there are a lot of different types of restaurants that come to Burger Week for different reasons, but we survey all of our restaurants every year, and our average ticket's $13. It's not $5. They get a beer, they get a side, sometimes 2 beers, But the cool thing is restaurants are packed. Again, it's about getting new people in your door, putting your food in their mouth for the first time. Hopefully they have a good experience and they come back. So I don't have the numbers for this year, but last year our restaurant sold 110,000 burgers in 1 week. 110,000. Okay, there's only 330,000 people in this city.
Yeah, depending on where you draw the the limit.
Sure.
Yeah,
But that's like 1 burger for every 3
Right.
people in town.
That's a good ratio. Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, people,
Now, you could have people going back for
oh yeah.
10s and 20s, though.
We have a handful of people each year that eat all of them.
Wow.
Yeah, so we have a passport, so it's got descriptions, and when you go to a restaurant, you can get it stamped.
Yeah.
And then at the end, if you do 3 or however many, you can sign up to win prizes. And so every year we have a handful of people that do. We had over 40 last year.
Yeah.
I had one guy who's done it several years in a row. He knocked them all out by Wednesday.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. He's a beast.
Yeah.
I mean, he takes off work. He and his brother
And then
take
went to
off
see his
work
doctor
for a
after
week.
that.
Yeah. And just go and eat burgers.
How many restaurants do you usually have participate?
Between 40 and 50.
That's a lot of burgers.
Yeah. But I mean, if you do the math, that's over 2,000 burgers. It's 2,500 on average a piece. That's a lot of burgers. And, we've got some restaurants that are big that can really knock them out. I think the Bluegrass Hospitality Group's restaurants sold 16,000 and change.
Right.
And then you've got, but I mean, even your little guys are knocking out 1,500, 2,500 for a small restaurant. They get slaughtered.
Sure. Well, yeah. I mean, if it brings up their bottom line, and more patrons, and
Right.
so yeah, it's
So
it's just amazing.
It's
what
sort
this
of
growing.
insanely popular, really. But it's
awesome.
it's a lot of fun, and by Thursday, I'm like, oh, I don't know if I can eat another burger. Because
Yeah.
we're going out to the first 3 days. We're trying to hit every place, eat
Yeah.
a burger, talk to them. Is everything going okay? And then we'll do like 3 in a day for the first couple of
A
days.
week's just long enough.
Yeah, we're trying to like get around to make sure they have everything they need, and but you eat a lot of burgers in that time, and then come Thursday, I'm like, oh boy, And then like Monday, after burger, we'd be like, maybe a burger might be good.
Now, forgive me if you all did you all do Taco Week too, or is that
Yes.
something? You did, okay. Because that's like the last year or two, right? That's
This year.
newer. Yeah.
Right, so our second one was Lexington Pizza Week, which is in a few weeks in November. Same concept, except we do $6 like personal pizzas, or it kind of depends on what people want to do, flatbreads or multiple slices, that sort of thing.
Right. There's a sweet deal though.
Yeah,
Sweet deal.
yeah. And so Pizza Week, and then this year we did Taco Week for the first time because people kept saying, "Do a Taco Week, do a Taco Week." I'm like, okay, we got to give people a break between weeks, you know.
Right. Yeah.
But so Taco Week,
It's like cholesterol's on the rise
Yes.
in Lexington.
yeah. Taco Week is interesting. This time we just it's $5 taco plates. That can be whatever the restaurant wants it to be. It can be like we had one that did like 5 tiny little tacos. We had one that did like one huge taco, like anything in
That's
between.
cool.
Yeah, so we kind of opened it up and said, you know what, do what you want, make it good. And so this year it was really important for us to bring in a lot of your, authentic, traditional, small, Mexican restaurants. And
You mean like not Americanized Mexican,
yeah,
that
'cause,
kind of thing?
I mean, any restaurant can make a taco, right? And we knew we could bring in a lot of our current customers that were, used to this concept, but we really wanted to get, the Gran Tacos and the Maria.
Yeah, this place is killer.
Yeah, Maria's and and we did get Gran Taco and they're great. But what we found that was really interesting was that we were getting a lot of those restaurants that were kind of saying, wait and see. We're going to wait and see. We're going to wait and see, or we're going to, we're just going to kind of watch how it goes. And then what we learned from a handful, and this really kind of blew our minds as Americans, United States of America capitalists, was we kept hearing from a couple of the restaurants that they were satisfied with their current business. And that kind of was a revelation to us. We're like, we're capitalists, we're never satisfied, right?
Right.
But a lot of them were like, well, we're okay with what we do.
Huh.
And that was like just such a mind-blowing thing for us.
Like unthinkable.
Right, because you're always trying to expand your business, right? Well, not necessarily. But thankfully we got a handful, and we hope to grow that base next year. As these guys have seen that we did all right. But Gran Taco was they were great to work with.
I mean, are you saying that the mentality of, like, it's just, is it an ethnic thing or a heritage thing that creates that different mentality, you mean? Or not having lived here their entire lives and being saturated with capitalism?
I think so.
Is that
yeah,
the deal?
that's the way I took it.
Yeah.
Which was, made both Chuck and I both kind of think, it takes you back for a minute and you go, there's some idea that somebody is, satisfied with the level of their business.
Yeah.
Wow. Never really thought about it.
Yeah, right.
I never really thought about that
Yeah.
before.
Like, I don't need to dig another hole and,
Right. Because I'm always trying to start something.
No, I hear you.
And it's not always about business. It's not always about money. It's just that we're creative people, and I like creating new things.
Yeah, I hear you.
I probably have too many things under. Right.
No.
Well,
You are.
It's funny. In the last few years, I've been kind of having the mantra internally of no more new projects, no more new projects. Concentrate on what we have. I mean, we have 12 employees and 3 publications, 4 websites, 2 festivals, and 3 pretty big promotions. And the Good Giving Challenge, which we haven't talked about. That's a lot,
Sure.
for a 12-person shop.
Right. Well, and even if you have people working for you and absorbing a lot of that work or doing the legwork, if you're like me, you know, you get to a point where like all of the software is running in your head and the computer's jamming up and it's like, you know, it's spinning and you're going, man, you know, like there was a point where I had quite a bit of real estate and eventually I sold it off because I was just like, you know, I'd be in here teaching and I'd be thinking, I wonder if the plumbing's all right over at that house or,
Right.
you know, and I don't know, are you like that? Where you,
I own some real estate.
yeah, so you know what I'm talking about. Yeah, he does too.
I can't
so.
stop.
Yeah, because you're like, I wonder if they fixed that sink like I told them to. Did they get the check? Did they blah blah blah? You know.
Right.
And yeah, so I dumped it. I just didn't want the stress anymore after years of doing that. But
I'm this weird. Well, Robbie Morgan on the radio several years ago was describing Chuck and I because she was asked, and she described us as incredibly lackadaisical yet driven. And at first I'm like, I think I'm offended, and I'm like, no, that's actually me to a T.
she was spot on.
I'm kind of like, I mean, honestly, like ask my wife, I'm sort of inherently lazy, and yet I always want to do new things.
That's me, man.
You know?
Believe me, I get it.
I'm always like working on creating the next thing, whatever that is. That and that doesn't mean I'm lazy about those things. I'm lazy about everything
Probably
else.
drives your wife nuts too. If it's,
Hi, honey.
it's like yeah,
Yeah.
it's like yeah, because it's really hard when your head's spinning constantly on new ideas and things to keep that focus.
Focus has become, honestly, an issue. I mean, it's not a big issue, but I'm trying to focus better because having all these things on my plate, it is difficult to give every one of them the attention that they deserve, especially when you're a small company that's kind of,
Sure.
I don't want to say overworked, but you know, we only have so many resources available to us. So when I do something new like Taco Week this year, only reason I said yes was because that had been kind of templated out. We know how to do that now.
Mm-hmm.
I can put that out and go, I know exactly how much work that's going to be, and I'm okay with it. But nothing else. You know, that's it.
Until the next thing.
Until the next thing.
brilliant flash comes along.
Right. So the other food related thing that we did not talk about was Bluegrass Barbecue Fest, which we started a few years back. That we just had our third back in June.
Okay.
So pretty straightforward. Downtown on the new courthouse lawns. So we basically put a big old stage right in the middle of Short Street, right between the two courthouse buildings. Shut down everything around that, and we have two nights. It's Friday night and Friday night and all day Saturday and Saturday night. We have a bunch of barbecue purveyors. We have some barbecuing and barbecue and grilling cook-offs, so to speak.
Cool.
And so we do a grilling, and which I get to judge, which is really nice.
That means you get to try everything.
I get to try everything. Yeah.
Well, judging's pretty good in this regard.
Yeah. So I mean, the concept of Caribbean Barbecue Fest is really simple, and it's outdoors, music, food, beer.
What more do you
Sounds
need?
like
I mean, it's not brain surgery,
yeah,
really.
you covered the
Right.
essentials. Yeah.
So if you think about Lexington and human beings in general, they like doing those things. They like to eat outdoors. They like to drink outdoors. They like to listen to music outdoors. Okay. If you look at the popularity of the street festivals in Lexington, you've got Night Market, Chevy Chase Street Fair, Southland, Jefferson Street Soiree.
Thriller.
Yep. You've got the Thriller. You've got National Avenue, Warehouse District. So I mean, all of those are insanely popular.
Oh yeah.
And
Thursday Night Live.
right, Thursday Night Live is a great example.
And
Yeah.
the Latin.
Oh,
Latin
yeah.
fest, yeah, that's huge.
Yes. So all those things are, you know, Pride is mostly outdoors, you know? I mean, all these are pretty big events, and they all pretty much have those elements. Now, pulling all those elements together, you know, and bringing on sponsors and making sure all the food vendors show up and, you know, Oh, that's, that takes, make sure all the bands come and your stage and lighting and beer
Yeah, sure.
permits and all that. That,
Everything's important.
that's the work part. And make no mistake, like, on site is a lot of work, set up, tear down, all those sort of things. But it is fun,
Yeah,
keeps me coming back.
sure. It'd be pretty cool. I mean, it's just popped into my head. Bourbon Fest. I'll give you something else to.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks.
It's gotta be in the works already somewhere.
Yeah, I mean that'd be a great idea. People just can go and try one, a dram of each
Right.
thing or whatever.
They
And,
do the pub crawl and all that kind of stuff.
yeah, pub crawl.
There's a couple of big ones in Louisville. Louisville has done an excellent job of owning bourbon, like just on a national, international reputation scale. I think, honestly, we kind of missed the boat on that maybe 10 or 15 years ago. I think we had a bit of a shot. I mean, we're hanging on the horse thing, but
But I think that I don't know if that is happening in Louisville with, say, if you had it published with, say, 20 to 30 local distilleries,
Right.
where you'd go in, you'd get a discounted shot,
right.
and hey, I can try this, see if I like it, in the same way you're doing Burger Week, and then people can.
Drunk so fast.
Oh yeah, yeah. But it's not unlike going on the Bourbon Trail anyway, where you're gonna,
Right.
unless you're choosing not to drink, you're probably gonna be wasted by the end of it.
Right.
And but yeah, that'd be a pretty cool thing. Actually, his older brother, my nephew Micah, owns Bourbonware. I don't know if you've heard of that, but he does like very high end leather goods.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, their dad was a really awesome leathersmith.
Okay.
And taught them, but they do like like coasters and bourbon glass holders.
Oh,
and
yeah,
all like
right.
high end leather, like the best stuff you can get
Oh,
around.
wow,
Yeah,
very
it's
cool.
awesome. So that'd be an idea for Micah to pick up and.
I think he'd be into it, yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. He does some really cool stuff, man. Well, so with the next barbecue fest, when does that happen again?
That's in June.
So next June, and that'll be the third one next year,
Fourth one.
fourth one.
Yes.
And so I guess you all have just rallied restaurants that offer barbecue and said we want to offer a special thing here.
Right.
And same principle or same thing
Yes.
as Burger Week. Yeah. Well, that's very cool.
Except that it's where Burger Week is decentralized at the individual restaurants. This is more festival. They come to the festival and serve at the festival.
Right. Yeah.
So we've
Gotcha.
got like festival-based model, and then
Yeah.
we've got the promotion
Yeah,
/
one place takes care of all of it
decentralized. Yeah.
versus go a different place
Yeah.
each day for a week or something.
And so sort of like the food weeks are generally an easier sell than even something like Crave, because you're sending people into their environment. So they prefer, a restaurant in general would prefer you to send somebody to their restaurant than for them to have to, bring on a bunch of people,
Sure.
set up, do this thing out at,
Food truck or
Yeah, I
something
mean,
like
it's hard work. It really is. I mean, if you're at Crave and you're selling 2,500, 3,000 portions, outside of your regular kitchen and all, like it's a lot of work.
Sure.
There's
And
gonna be
it's-
a big payoff though, because there's so many new places, especially with barbecue.
Oh yeah,
Man, it's popping up all the time to get exposure like that.
yeah. Well, in barbecue, barbecue guys in general, their mobility is high,
Right.
So they all of them do catering. They can cook up, 500 pounds of meat.
It's not like doing a sushi truck or something.
Right, and the other really good thing about barbecue joints is they can serve quickly. I mean, it's like,
Right.
it's not, there's not a lot of, prep for the individual stuff.
it
It's
easy,
like,
yeah.
here you go, bun, pickle, eat
Yeah.
that. And so they can really knock it out, if they're prepared.
Yeah.
The biggest issue they have is not smoking enough meat. So sometimes, so they don't want to get stuck with an extra 100 pounds of brisket,
Right. It's just
right?
not bad.
Right. So some of them, especially their first time, they come out and they run out in the middle of the first day, and they go,
Yeah.
and then then their neighbor takes all their business.
Yeah, so getting that apportioned out. Yeah, I guess that would be really hard to know just how many people are going to show and
Yeah.
get from you, you know. Yeah, that'd be a tough.
The places that can, when it comes to barbecue, the restaurants that can really produce, they're the ones that make the most money because they just, you've got a restaurant in town, they're bringing it out in cars when they run low. They call the shop and they bring out more meat, and they just keep serving. So,
That's awesome.
I mean, Red State, the first year we did it, I mean, it wasn't even maybe 6 o'clock it was, I don't remember, it was early on Friday, and they just got wiped out. They took their truck, actually left, went to the restaurant, loaded up, came back, sold out again, went back. And I guess that was on Saturday. Then they sold out 3 times.
Man, must have been good stuff.
Yeah, they make great barbecue.
Yeah, that's really awesome. So, tell me a little bit about when you started Business Weekly.
Business Lexington.
Or Business Lexington,
Yeah.
excuse me, I'm sorry,
Sure.
Business Lexington. Yeah, because I actually wrote for that. It's been some years.
Right.
But what was the model just to let's talk about just the business side of Lexington more, and that was to like going a little bit more in depth on businesses than say Chevy Chase or Southside or
Right.
Light. Was that?
Well, so this was 2004 or 5, I believe, 5, and we kept hearing from people in the business community, hey, there's not enough business coverage in this community. And we kept hearing that and hearing that and hearing that, and so we said, okay, over a couple of beers, we said, is this the direction we want to go? And, after 3 hours of drinking beer, the answer was yes. And so 6 weeks later, we had our first issue out. So we went around to some business leaders around town, just sat down with them, said, what are you looking for? What's happening? Can you feed us stories? And it was interesting because there was a lack of trust in the business media at the time by companies, and execs in town. And we said, look, we're not playing gotcha journalism. We're going to report on.
Oh, you mean the companies were leery of
the coverage.
of
at the
coverage?
time.
Yeah, okay, gotcha. Uh-huh.
Yes. And so we said, we're not out to, that's not the point of what we're doing. We really wanted to tell, again, we want to tell cool stories of people doing good stuff. We didn't want it to make it your father's business journal. It wasn't all going to be about facts and figures and numbers. It was going to be a little more magazine-y style, a little bit more focused on local businesses, entrepreneurs, people doing cool stuff, as opposed to, oh, here's another TIF district story, or
Something boring
yeah. We tried to make it a little bit more interesting.
or fluff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. A little more in depth than what maybe say the Herald Leader might do. They might do, sometimes they'll do more in depth stories, but a lot of times it's shallow. Let me rephrase that. I don't mean shallow. Short is what I mean.
Yeah, just doesn't have enough time to go into
Or sometimes like it's a breaking news thing. They've got the story and they want to get it out right now, and it's a handful of paragraphs, and they don't come back and like flesh out that story like, okay, well, what happened? So we might take something that happened 3 weeks ago and go, let's do an in-depth story about that. Everybody knows it's happened now, but let's talk about what are the repercussions of that sort of thing. And so again, more magazine style than, we're not trying to be a daily. That's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to do the more maybe in-depth story.
But just keeping it old school where you're really trying to just say, what's the story, what's the story, what's
Yeah.
the story, and, not, yeah. Just I'm being in that business, it seems to me that years ago, it would seem that if there was any subjectivity to a cover story of any kind, that it would be called, a biased story or even yellow journalism or something like that, where it had a negative thing. But now it seems passé. It seems like the lines are not drawn anymore between this is, and that's not just print. I mean, that's
I could talk about that all day.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I
and-
agree with you.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess it's odd to me sometimes because, I mean, if it's an op-ed piece, I can understand it, right?
People don't understand the difference between a news piece and an op-ed piece anymore. Plain
Right.
and simple.
There is no
Right.
difference.
Yeah, it's like we may as well not have used
Well,
the
I mean,
terms.
I might disagree with you there that there are things that are clearly op-ed, right?
Right.
So a news magazine or a newspaper, for example, has an op-ed, but I don't think the public understands what an op-ed is, as opposed to this is one person's opinion, as opposed to our hopefully unbiased journalism. Here's a story, and just the story side of things. People see, oh, that came from the New York Times, and it's saying all this stuff that I disagree with.
That's what you're saying.
I'm like, well, yeah, okay, but that's because it's
it's
literally
op-ed.
one person's opinion. That is not the opinion of the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal. It's one person's opinion.
Well, and normally those that you mentioned are pretty good about labeling them as op-ed.
Right, but people,
Sometimes they're
But
not.
but you're right. If Joe consumer doesn't understand the difference between them, they
Right.
just see them as, well, the New York Times must feel this way as a whole.
well, especially when they get passed around on social media, they're like, oh, Wall Street Journal doesn't know, they don't know what they're talking about here. And then, yeah, it says it's op-ed somewhere, or opinion piece or whatever they call it.
Right.
But people, that's not what they see. They just stamp fake news on it or,
Yeah. Or
Sometimes you do see op-eds front and center on websites and
Yeah.
stuff like
Oh,
that.
absolutely.
Where an op-ed shouldn't, I wouldn't think that should be
Yeah.
front and center on a website.
Right. Yeah.
That should be,
Well, and also get sliced and diced. Like there, many times I'll see on Facebook somebody will take a piece of a story that's highly opinionated and say, well, this, was said in, this magazine,
Taken out of
but then it
context.
doesn't have the author's name. It doesn't have what kind of
Yes.
column it's supposed to be. They just, and I mean, there's a lot of that, and then that turns into a,
they don't cite things properly.
oh God, no.
oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Exciting. What's that?
Yeah, see, that's really weird to me too, that, if you are gonna do an op-ed piece, it would look like you would want to, as a journalist, say, well, this is why I feel that way. Here are 2 or 3 credible sources to back this up. Much the way you would if you were doing graduate work somewhere.
Right.
But I don't think people even care nowadays. It's more
I
like,
tend to agree with you. I think
mean-
most people don't, there's a lot of willful ignorance,
Oh, yeah.
honestly.
yeah, it's almost like it takes effort to actually think, and therefore I don't.
Themselves.
Yeah.
People love,
See, it's scary to me though, because you can, why did that method of research and critical analysis even develop to begin with, and then proliferated into grad schools, into master's programs and PhDs and so on? It's because that's what works.
Right.
And if we were talking about something artistic and we said, well, my opinion about, how this crumb cake should taste is blah, 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 blah. And then people are like, oh, okay, he likes the lemon with the crumb cake.
Yeah, right.
Well, I don't agree with him. I want something else. Who cares, right? But let's say that you're working on, some cancer research. And you say, well, this is my opinion on, but that's what I'm saying. It's like these opinion things seem to be proliferating even into the sciences. And to me, that's very scary because number one, you're halting research. You're not getting, the money that's being spent on certain things that could save lives to where it needs to be because somebody's opinion's getting in the way of it.
Right.
and then you combine that with the willful ignorance
Yeah, like people are,
discussing.
yeah.
Well, I do, what do they call it? They call it confirmation bias, right? So,
Right.
I'm, goofing around on Facebook and some story comes up. I'm like, yeah, and then I stop. You have to stop yourself and go, well, I need to use the same critical analysis that I use to debunk things I disagree with this, right?
Mm-hmm.
The first thing I need to do when that story comes across my Facebook feed is go, who wrote it?
Yeah, right.
Right?
Who's doing the talking?
I mean, literally, you look at some of these things and you're like, who?
Right.
Right? And I'm not saying it can't be correct, but it doesn't take much research at all to debunk a lot, in anything that's, or confirm, exactly.
Right, yeah.
Right, it's not a hard thing to do, and yet people don't do it. But I see people that I know politically agree with me, on most things, and they're passing on garbage, and you go, oh,
Yeah, right.
man, you're making us all look bad.
Yeah, it's like I didn't want to be bothered in actually checking it out or looking it up.
Right.
It just took a little too much effort, and it's a lot easier just to sort of, throw some more gas on this fire and
Right.
watch it burn.
And it's easy. All you gotta do is hit share.
Yeah.
Super easy.
Instead of just, doing even literally a minute's worth of research.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it really doesn't take long.
Or just, yeah, or even stuff that probably doesn't even require research. Like, for me, it's always been a really strange phenomenon that people will take more stock in what a Hollywood actor says concerning politics versus, somebody who is actually in the political arena. To me, that's always been weird. Like, if I said, well, I really agree with Robert De Niro on this because he said X, Y, and Z. And I like De Niro, by the way, but I'm just using him because he's been very vocal
Right.
about this presidency, as I think we all know. But, you say, okay, well, I agree with him because he's Robert De Niro, and I happen to like Taxi Driver. Well, okay, that's one view. But, if you took that same thing and said, well, I agree with this other person, and here's why. I actually checked out, here's what this person has done for the economy, here's how they've furthered programs, here's what, I can point to things. But, most people it seems, who are doing the screaming just don't have all that backed up. They're not going, here's why. They're just saying, I didn't like he said this, and
Yeah, I mean, I can
weird.
see two sides of that argument. One is, like, if I was a famous person and my career was pretty set, I would probably speak out on things I felt strongly about. That being said, as the person hearing him, or hearing me for that matter, doesn't mean my opinion nobody should care what my opinion is, because I might be well versed, but hardly necessarily an expert either.
Right.
I mean, I try not to get political. Facebook, for example, is a really easy place to get political.
I
I
bet.
really, really try hard.
I hear you, man. Yeah.
Very, very hard not to, even though I want to often.
Sure.
But honestly, you're not going to change anybody's mind.
No.
Not in that arena.
Yeah.
And,
And it's not a partisan issue either.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
it swings both ways because
Sure.
it's more of a human issue where it's just like, well, I want to have my opinion and I happen to like the way this person said something, or I saw that person in a movie and I like them because of that. I'm going to jump on their bandwagon and I'm going to have the same fervor about it that they do. And then I'll have a stance and then people will listen to me. But that happens on both sides.
Right.
It really does. So it's,
I've just never really thought anybody would care what my opinion was either, because who am I? Yeah.
well, yeah, or I think if you put yourself out there, whether you're, well known as somebody or whatever, the issue too is there. To me, there should be an obligation to tell people, here's why my opinion matters. I mean, not in an ego way, but in a, actually, I went and did this research because I was really interested in the topic, and here's my opinion now, and this backs this up, and so on. Just like you would if you were writing a dissertation.
Yeah.
But not, I just happen to like this, and therefore it has to be this way.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. People don't think much past that, I don't think.
No, yeah, I mean, when it gets back to that fragmentation of media that I was talking about, I mean, it's fragmented to the point of infinite minutia, right?
Right.
There's a website, there's thousands of websites for any stupid thing you can imagine, whether it's a political opinion, it's a business idea. Just, you could have some random thought and type those words into Google, and I guarantee you'll have thousands of hits.
Sure.
Nothing you've come up with has not been explored by somebody,
Right.
and somebody who had the time to put it online. That's what I mean. That's a double-edged sword too. Like, I think about all the people, like, you had time to do that. You had time to write up something about that tiny bit of nothing. But then at the same time, I see one of these like these music videos that somebody made Legos do the whole music video, and I go, I'm so glad you had the time to do that, because who else would do this, right?
Yeah.
Some guy that spent 3 months in his basement, doing a Joy Division cover with Legos. I'm like, that's so cool. But, like nobody would ever get paid to do that.
Right.
But it swings the other way too, like,
Yeah, it
oh
is cool
boy,
stuff,
man,
though.
you really spent that much time on that? Really?
Yeah. Well, and it probably goes back to that, just the happiness factor, because, like I do that same thing. I'll look at videos that come through on my feed or whatever, and I
Right.
say, well, wow, that is amazing. You have, you got 20 birds to sing in unison after trying to work with them for 2 years, and now they're finally singing the national anthem in unison, that kind of thing. And I'm like, wow, that is really cool. That person probably isn't expecting to make any money
Right.
off of it, unless they're going on some game show type thing. But, maybe they're happy in that. They could be
Everybody
happier
gets
than
their-
I am.
Everybody gets their 15 minutes, right?
Yeah, I mean, but it seems like times have gotten such that people love the ridiculous, or the things that
Yeah.
really don't have anything to do with anything.
Right.
Like they're so, and I do it too. I numb myself to reality by looking at the absurd.
Oh, absolutely. I love the absurd.
Oh yeah.
But at the same time, it goes back to there's not much in the way of filter on the web and in social media, in the sense that I think that's why a brand of, say, a publication in this day and age matters, because you have a reputation. Like if I read a New York Times article, I know that it's been vetted. Editors have looked at it. They've probably hired the best people in the business to write it. So I can have a certain amount of trust in the sense that even if it's an opinion piece or a story, that, hey man, this short story, 12 editors at the New York Times thought it was pretty good enough to print. That's something. Social media, the web, you get a lot of input, right? But there's not a lot of filter, except frankly what other people, their likes and their opinions. So in social media in particular, I tend to follow people that I find interesting. And so when I see several people showing the same video, sharing the same story, whatever it was, I know, okay, person has a cracked sense of humor like I do, okay? They think that's good, I'm gonna read it, okay? So you've got like this legacy media approach where you have editors that, say, hey, this has enough quality to be put out into the world. And then you've got everything else. And you start thinking of the filters start becoming people you trust.
Right, more local, in other words,
Sometimes,
Yeah,
local or within your tribe.
within
or,
your own locality, not geographic.
Or your
but-
headspace, or you
Yeah.
have a niche interest in something. So, I'm a car guy, which we were discussing before. And so I've got communities of people who are into the same cars and stuff that I am. And so if something comes through and all of a sudden all these guys are sharing it, I know, hey, that's probably something I'm going to enjoy. Same thing happens whether you're interested in dance or martial arts or whatever it might be. There are people that you start trusting in those online communities.
Sure.
And so they become the de facto editors, in a sense.
It's interesting. And speaking of martial arts, there's years ago there were some guys that created it's like a website, but it does have like a interactive blog type thing on it. But it's called Bullshido, and and it's basically a catch basin for just martial arts that really aren't martial arts.
Clowns.
Yeah. So
Okay.
it ranges from the guys who just have 100 students and they go woo, and then they all fall down.
Oh yeah, those
that,
are fun.
Yeah, that kind of stuff. Which is great parlor trick
Right.
entertainment. To people who are maybe just kind of backyard fighting, but not really doing martial arts.
Yes.
Right? They're just street brawling or whatever. So to me, that was a great sort of, thing that vetted people, or sort of kept it real. And I can go on there and know, okay, there's been at least some degree of like stuff that I'm going to be more interested in some of that than I would if I just watched, a martial arts blog or wrote on it, or I went to a YouTube channel that was involved with martial arts. That could be anything, because I mean, probably like with publishing, it's 90 to 95% crap, most of it. I mean, because if you actually know what you're talking about in a certain subject, it doesn't take long to, smell manure.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, there's plenty of it. Hey guys, listen, we're going to take a quick break, hear from some people. We'll be back here at Sebastian and Sierp with Chris Eddy. We'll be right back. Hello, I'm Chip Sebastian. I am the co-host of Sebastian and Sierp. If you've been liking the shows, please click like down below. And if you want to subscribe to our YouTube channel, jump on over to YouTube, click subscribe, and you will get the most recent episodes of our show, where we're interviewing all kinds of great and interesting people. So we're looking forward to a lot more shows. Stay tuned. It's rolling. Just begun. All right, you guys, we are back here at Sebastian and Sierp. Chris Eddy is our guest tonight for this Halloween special. Boy, have we been having fun. We're glad you're tuning in. We wanted to make sure that we had the proper website stuff here. So if people want to go check out Southside or Chevy Chaser online, I know you deliver them,
Right.
But also they have online access, right?
Yeah, so the
Okay.
easiest way to access all of our publications is smileypete.com.
SmileyPete.com. And then also, isn't that in some other publications here in town besides Smiley Pete? I mean, like Burger Week and stuff?
So all of the other stuff, all the other festivals have their own websites.
Okay.
So it's
So
LexingtonBurgerWeek.com.
Burger Week, Taco Week, Pizza Week.
Right.
And is it, the barbecue thing, is that called?
BluegrassBBQFest.com.
BluegrassBBQFest.com. If you want some good barbecue, folks, that's the place to go. So you were talking about your, is it a foundation that you have, or?
Well, so we, for the last, this will be our 8th year, Smiley Pete and the Bluegrass Community Foundation have put on the Good Giving Challenge. So it's an online giving challenge for Central Kentucky nonprofits. So this year we have 130 something Central Kentucky nonprofits. We create a guide, which I brought, but I didn't I didn't bring up here. But so it's online giving. So the idea for us was we wanted to create.
I'll grab it. Keep going.
Okay. We wanted to create a challenge that instead of a bunch of rich people giving thousands, tens of thousands of dollars to the same nonprofits each year, that we could give everybody the option to give something, whether it's $10,000 or $5. We don't care. You can do it online. This is last year's. The new one is at the press at the moment.
Good Giving Challenge.
Yeah, so
That's awesome.
bggives.com. And so inside this book, you will see my pretty face, but you'll also see lots of nonprofit descriptions. So you can go onto the website and you can give to one, you can give to lots of different ones.
Hey,
It's
helping
all up to
hounds find homes. I never heard of that one. That's cool.
you. There you go. So in
So
the
it's like
first,
10 million you all?
first
great.
7 years, we raised $10 million, which is pretty solid.
That's awesome.
We expect to raise about 1.7, 1.8 this year. So we got this, again, we got this idea from another publication, also in Portland, Oregon, a different one. And they've been doing it for a couple of years and it was going well. We came back here and said, hey, that's a great idea, but we can't pull that off on our own. So we talked to some people and they said, you should talk to the Bluegrass Community Foundation. We said, okay. And so we sat down with them. They said, this is a good idea. And we thought, okay, so we don't really have time to do it this year. How about next year? And we all said, okay, because it was October, I think. And they called us back the next day and they're like, we want to do it this year. So we sat back down and we said, okay, how do we do this? We don't have much time. Let's knock it out. And so we said, hey, let's have a goal of how much money we want to raise. So we wanted to raise $100,000. And so we launched it, and it did over $200,000. So we were really stoked about that. And so it continually, ratcheted up over the first couple of years. And now we have some corporate donors, and we have some other foundations that give money through this. So they kind of juice other people's giving. So like, hey, we've got a $50,000 match. Okay, so
Nice.
we're going to match 50 cents on every dollar during today. Okay, so if you give $1, we're going to match it 50 cents. So they turn that $50,000 into $100,000 worth of giving during that day, or hopefully more even. And so that's been really great. But the trick for us was making it really easy for people to give. Right now, like, I think a lot of people, it gets down to the last week of the year, like, my accountant says I need deductions, and how do I give money? And then they find something and they mail a check, and that's crazy today, right? When you can just go to bggives.com and you could give to one, or you could give to 130. You could give to each 130, $10 each.
So it's almost like a mutual fund. You can like disperse it as you wish.
Yeah.
Or just throw it all on Coke or Pepsi or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
And the cool thing, so even if somebody gives $5 to a nonprofit, that nonprofit now has that donor on their list. So that means they can invite them to, an event they might have. They can ask them all year long for additional donations. You've just grown your donor base, maybe not exponentially, but greatly,
Sure.
And they have the opportunity to go back to those donors and say, hey, we got this thing going on. How about a little bit more? And so we wanted to develop donors. So we wanted to get people used to giving, right? So I think people of a certain income were used to giving, but we wanted to open it up to lots and lots of people to be able to give and to do it quickly and easily.
It sounds like that's a real theme with you all in terms of just kind of getting that middle market, which is larger, of course, but you know what I mean? Because you were saying the same thing about Burger Week. Like, we're really trying to make it available to everyone, not just this elitist thing or well-heeled thing.
Right. So, I think, if you know us for Chevy Chaser and Southsider and BizLex, we, those are definitely focused on a higher income demographic. But pretty much everything else we do is for everyone. So, we like to, we don't like to do events that are, like you said, kind of super elitist. That's not really it's not as fun.
Yeah, black tie fundraisers and
Yeah.
they're great. Those are wonderful. Just
Yeah, they're great.
You're doing a slightly different thing. Hey, show people the Southsider and the Chevy Chaser
okay.
so they can see. So that's Southsider
So
magazine.
the Southsider. So this was during Burger Week. And then we've got, this is the current issue of Chevy Chaser magazine. If you guys are familiar with the Prohibition, the mural project around town, these are two of the guys that were involved in making murals this year. They've done a bunch of murals around town. Here is Business Lexington.
Oh, very nice. Yeah. Wonderful. Scare tactics.
It's a story about all the Halloween scare trails around town.
Oh,
and
yeah.
the business of those.
Wow. That burger's making me hungry. That's right. Because do you have anything you want to add to our show tonight that we haven't talked about or anything?
Nothing I can think of.
Yeah, we'd love to have you back on the show at a future date.
Sure.
And we're really hoping to just get, kind of the nuts and bolts of what you've been doing and
Right.
get the word out there even more with people and all that. So,
Well, I
Aaron,
really-
did you have anything
Well,
later?
good.
Pretty good.
Yeah, it was a great interview.
I really appreciate you guys having me on.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, it's terrific. Love having it. Folks, that wraps us for another Sebastian and Syrup. We are so pleased to have talked with Chris Eddy here tonight, and we look forward to seeing him again. If you're out and about and you're hungry, and I know you are, Burger Week, Taco Week, Pizza Week, and barbecue,
And Crave.
and crave. There is so much food. I mean, I don't even need to say it, do I? You love it. Anyway, folks, we'll see you on the next Sebastian and Syrup. Till then. And we're out. Cool, man.
Well, thanks.
There's something about my house that holds the past. My body holds spirit in similar stead, memorizes and sells with potential flame, ghosts of the worlds by flesh and bone fed. The walls of this room are my heart's strength, the sink my blood that flows with fire. The bedroom holds my resting bones, the brick my flesh and fair attire. I was a boy who lost his way on the winding wood of spirits slain. No memory, no fair words portray on the glade where kings and princes reign. A castle under the silver moon hovering by the sea that pounds below the thundering sky to infinity. A maiden in the castle keep, her hero in the moat. A girl who for her lover weeps, armed guards in every boat. Find these poems and many more at lulu.com, L-U-L-U, lulu.com, under Charles Sebastian. Charles Sebastian, Seasons of the Centaur. Available at lulu.com.